There's a whole lot of things I want to tell you about. Adventures, dangerous and queer. Some you could guess, and some I've only hinted at. So please lend me your ear.
Everyone has a relationship with gender. What's your story? Hello and welcome to Gender Stories with your host, Dr. Alex Yantafi.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Gender Stories. I know that I'm always excited, but I can't help it. I have the most wonderful guests and I feel so fortunate that I get to talk with them. And today I have the very good fortune and delight to be speaking to Renée Yoxon, who is a queer, non-binary and disabled gender-affirming voice teacher with a passion for voice education, creativity, and vocal curiosity. Since 2010, they have taught thousands of students how to love their voice, and their strength as a teacher is really explaining complicated concepts in plain language that anyone can understand, as well as anticipating student problems before they occur. They're the creator of a suite of online courses that provide concise and easy to follow trans voice education to trans and non-binary people all over the world. Renée is a creative thinker and a deep listener, and their favorite thing in the world is helping people just like you to reach their voice goals. And you can find them at reneeyoxon.com, but also don't worry, as usual, I will have all the links to all the things, including their social media platforms, because they're very active on social media, including TikTok, in the episode description. So welcome, Renée. Thank you so much for making time for speaking with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Alex. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm so excited. I feel like I could talk with you about 1,000 things. And I'm really excited because one of the very early episodes of Gender Stories actually was about voice, because it was Trans Voices Festival in Minneapolis at that time, all the way back in 2018 when I just started the podcast. I know it's been a minute. And that was so fun. And I think voice is just so important for everybody. It's such a part of who we are, but especially for trans, non-binary, and gender expansive people. So maybe we can start from just a really simple question. What is a gender-affirming voice teacher? Like, what does that role mean? What does it look like? Yeah.
When I tell people like at a party or something that I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, everyone always says, oh, wow, I've never heard of that job before. Basically, my role is to help trans and non-binary and gender expansive people to create speaking voices that bring them safety and comfort. And I do that primarily now through my online courses, but I have in the past done that through in-person workshops and private lessons.
Yeah, well, I do have more questions about what has led you to go in this direction. But before I go and lose myself in the little rabbit hole, what is the difference between a voice teacher and a speech and language therapist? Because, for example, I think for a long time, a lot of trans folks, the only option we were offered was like speech and language therapy. So what's the difference between a voice teacher and a speech and language therapist for folks who are listening and might not know the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So speech language pathology is, as you say, like the traditional place that you would get this information. The difference is that I am not like a medical professional. So my background is in singing teaching or voice pedagogy. So I'm like a voice professional. I have a background in singing. I have a jazz degree and a songwriting degree, and I have like a decade's worth of singing teaching experience. And speech language pathologists can be voice experts, but the field is much larger than that. They also tackle things like swallowing and voice disorders and cancer screening and feeding for babies. Like there's a whole bunch of things. So gender affirming voice is just like one tiny specialization within speech language pathology, whereas a gender affirming voice teacher only does gender affirming voice. So we work really closely with SLPs. And like, for instance, I'm going to be speaking on a panel for the American Speech and Hearing Association alongside a bunch of trans SLPs. So we're not strangers, but it's like a Venn diagram, we're like cousins.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to make it clear for folks listening, because they're like, oh, is it the same? Is it different? I'm like, always like to get those definitions out of the way early on.
It's like hard to say how they're different now, especially because like I run a teacher training program every year, and I originally created it for people like me who are trying to pivot into gender affirming voice from the singing side of things. But actually, like fully half of my students are speech language pathologists who didn't get enough information about this through their continuing education or from their university programs. So they've come to me. And so now it's like, I'm teaching them, they're teaching me, you know, like we're helping each other. The big difference though, is that they can take insurance and I can't.
Yes. That's a wonderful cross-pollination though.
Yes.
But it's also really great to see that there is an increasing number of voice affirming, gender affirming voice teachers because, sometimes the field of gender affirming care is so medicalized. And so it's really wonderful to also have that support not come from within the medical industrial complex in some ways. And I don't know if you ever get clients who are like, I really want to work with my voice, but I'm just, I don't want to work with a medical provider. I actually just want to work on my voice with like a voice teacher and not feel like every aspect of my identity and transition is like medicalized. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Totally, 100%. And that's a big part of like my approach to gender affirming voice. I love that people have the option to do it through the medical care system because of the insurance system set up in place. But like you say, like being consistently medicalized and having to have a problem to be solved is not always a positive way to approach your transition. Then just to be clear, there's lots of SLPs who don't see it as a problem to be solved. But my approach is fully exploratory. Like I will help you explore the bounds of your voice and create something like it's creation, it's exploration. It's not like you have problem, I solve problem, So I really like that approach to the practice.
Absolutely. And I love that you talk about, I help people explore kind of the range because, as somebody who is older and has also worked with older trans folks, we didn't have a lot of options. And I think that, historically, there's been this expectation that you just go from one end of the gender spectrum to the other, right? And so you either are masculinizing your voice or you're feminizing your voice, right? And I feel now we have so much more of an expansive view of what we can do with our voice and also just so many more examples of like trans vocalists and singers in every area, from opera singers to pop singers, which is so exciting, even in terms of representation. But I remember like 20 years ago, it was almost impossible to find any information actually about voice and gender affirming care, and even less so coming from a trans and or non-binary perspective.
Totally.
So can you say a little bit more about that expansiveness that not everybody wants to masculinize or feminize? They might want more creativity in their approach to voice.
I can say a lot about that, in fact, because as I told you before we jumped on the call, I'm speaking at the Philadelphia Trans Wellness Conference on Friday, or I'm speaking on Saturday, but that's what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about this new course that I created in April, released in April, called Mix and Match, Designing Your Non-Binary Voice. And the whole thought process behind making that was that there were many use cases in gender affirming voice that are not covered by, strictly speaking, masculinizing and feminizing. There's, of course, like the neutral case, like lots of non-binary people want something neutral. And that might involve masculinizing and feminizing like to a degree, but you might also want to be like a gender confusion. So if you're being read as masculine, maybe you want to hyper feminize your voice to like throw people off or vice versa. Or maybe you want to combine qualities of the voice in a way that is less usual. And I've called this use case gender alien. So like there was those three cases where how I started to conceive of Mix and Match. And what I really wanted to do was create a course that like anyone from any starting point could create any kind of finishing point. So it's a very like open, choose your own adventure type of course.
I love that because even in terms of when, and if trans and non-binary folks want to do any kind of transition, whether it's social or medical, like I think that it is much more choose your own adventure nowadays. I mean, I know there are still a lot of restrictions in terms of where you live, whether it's in the US, Canada, other countries, what the system allows, right? But I think there is just so much more interest in actually that expansive and non-binary piece. And that's very exciting to me as also a non-binary person.
Yes, but I also think binary trans people benefit from this as well, right? Like at the end of the day, we all get to choose our own adventure, even if you're cisgender.
Well, exactly, which actually was a question that I was thinking about asking. It's like, what if cis people want to take their courses? Because, also like, where is the line where cis stops and non-binary begins and then trans, right? But what if somebody who maybe still identifies as cis or is not sure, still wants to explore voice from this perspective? Would that be welcome to take your courses or?
Yeah, this is something that I haven't made a policy around necessarily because I don't get to decide who's trans and who's cis at the end of the day. So cis people are welcome to take my course because in my heart, I think everyone should be able to explore their gender on their own terms, even if they do so and then decide that they're fine with where they started,
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how that translates into the community aspect of my course. Do I allow cis people into my office hours with trans people? Not explicitly, but it's a trans space at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. Now that makes a lot of sense because you want to keep that kind of safer or at least more shared space that we sometimes keep in community, right? But I can totally imagine that some cis folks would want to kind of play with their voice in some ways. And also, all of us have started from somewhere in our gender exploration.
Well, this is it. I think if you're cis and you're taking my course, maybe you're not that cis.
Maybe ask yourself some questions. I'm with you. I'm always when people are like, well, I'm cisgender. And, then there's all the stuff about gender that comes up. I mean, sometimes, absolutely. And sometimes I'm like, here, friend, I wrote a whole book, How to Understand Your Gender about this, which is for anyone.
And I mean, at the end of the day, the cis and trans binary is just another unhelpful binary. I think I was just listening to the Gender Reveal podcast just now and someone identified as cis plus.
Love that.
Which I thought was so funny. But also, before I was doing courses and teaching privately, I would regularly get emails from cisgender people who had very reasonable requests. I got an email from a gay man who lived somewhere where it was not legal to be gay and wanted to masculinize his voice for safety and comfort, the same reasons that trans people change their voice. And I would get emails from women wanting to either feminize or masculinize, depending on the context. There are cis people out there who want to modify their voice as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that gender affirming care is for everybody, and that's so much of the premise of my work is that really the gender binary also impacts everybody, regardless of how we identify, right? And also the voice is so cultural. It's so fascinating. I'm on my third adventure with T, as I call it, testosterone. I'm not on and off every year, but 13, 14 years ago, I had my first year on T and then I stopped. I think a lot of non-binary people have interesting relationships with hormones, right? And now I'm kind of having another round. And, one of my partners was like, oh, your voice now sounds in English like it sounds in Italian, because in Italian it's so much deeper, And I even remember when I moved to the UK, I was like, why? I was still fan presenting and identifying. And I was like, why do all the women talk up here like this? This is not something that I've experienced in my culture, right? It was just everybody seemed so much more high pitch.
And this is documented. This is a well-documented phenomenon.
It's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's and I think that's something that not everybody thinks about, that culturally, yes, there is Anglo culture, really, that binary is pushed to the limit and pushes people to sometimes not use their voices in a comfortable way. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. But
did you say Anglo culture does that?
Anglo, yeah. I think
it's interesting because even within English, there are so many different cases of this. So if you look at New Zealand English,
yes,
they tend to differentiate gender way less than Californian English, for example.
That's true. Good
Isn't
point.
that interesting?
That is fascinating. But yeah, I wonder if you have any thoughts about that interaction about voice, culture, and gender, or if you've had clients who've been wanting to explore that, or yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I have lots of thoughts about it.
Good. I want them all. I want all your thoughts from you. You're brilliant. Let me tap that brilliant mind.
Oh my gosh. I mean, look, even before I was doing online courses, I was teaching here in Montreal, which is famously very multicultural. So I would have, I think every student I taught spoke at least 2 languages, usually 3. And different languages tend to have different average pitches, different resonances, as you're saying. So we would have to like work on multiple languages with every individual student. But further to that, like now in 2024, we're interconnected globally in a way we never have been before. So it's way more likely that I, as a gender-affirming voice teacher, will teach someone outside of my region, outside of my culture, outside of my language. And I fully have taught like people in Brussels or who speak in Dutch, or I don't know, like, all things that I would not run into necessarily on the street. And because of that, we have to be even more mindful not to impose our biases around gender expression vocally. So that was another thing that I thought about a lot when I was making Mix and Match. Like I had made a few courses before that with the information I knew about course making. But this time I really was like, who am I not considering when I'm thinking about the typical student taking this course? And I really had to like open my mind. Like, I don't know anything really about anyone. I can't assume anything about gender. And even what we like, you would kind of think broadly, like, feminine voices are like this and, physically, and masculine voices are like this physically. It doesn't hold up. There's no universal, ubiquitous expression of gender. Like a really good case I love is that we tend to think of like a wide contour, so a wide range of pitches as being a feminine trait, and a more shallow or monotonous range of pitches as being a masculine trait. But there's a study that showed that German speakers, men have wider contours and women have shallower contours. And I know lots of people who speak German. I just never noticed that. So I think, you really cannot assume anything about what someone's goals are unless you live in that community with them.
I love that. And at the same time, I feel like voice is something that culturally people really rely on in terms of as one of the gender markers, right? Totally. It's like, I often, it's so fascinating to me to see how people gender me. And the older I get, the more fascinated and less bothered I get. Now it's almost like just some social experiment. Let's see how my gender is read in different contexts. If I'm by myself or with other people, depending on who I'm with. And especially I'm still masking everywhere in public. And so, sometimes if I'm masking and depending on how I'm dressed, I get scared, and then I'll say something and then they're like, oh, sorry, ma'am. I mean, sir, I mean, ma'am. And I'm like, it's all good. Take a breath. I'm like, let's take a breath. It's all good. I'm not upset. You can just be like, hey, friend, or whatever works. But it's so fascinating to me how we're still relying on voice so much. And depending on who I'm talking to, they might also read the voice as more masculine or more feminine in different places. And so it's just this really interesting thing that
it's so context specific too.
Yes.
I mean, I live in Montreal, but I just spent 6 months living in Mexico City, and I found that I transgressed gender harder there than I do here. Here I'm like average height. I dress like it's all a bunch of like hip weirdos here in Montreal. They dress every kind of way.
That's real.
But in Mexico City, I found that like I leaned more masculine. Just I didn't change anything about me, but I got stirred a lot more than I do here. It was really wild to experience. I came home kind of like, did I like that? Maybe I should go empty.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. When I go to Italy, it's like, it's a real mixture. Sometimes if I'm by myself, I get stared more. But if I'm with my kids, then it's like ma'amed more. It's like, like you said, it's context. People are reading all these different clues that are totally out of our control also.
100%. You can't hang your expectations on other people. Like if passing is such a nefarious goal because it totally depends on 100 factors, as you just said.
And it depends on other people's perceptions, which are really, we can do things to ourselves as trans people, but it's really outside of our control.
Exactly.
How people perceive us in so many ways. Well, in talking about things out of our control, I think that when people take hormones, I know for me and I know for other folks I've worked with and friends as well, one of the things that's out of your control for folks who go from estrogen dominant to testosterone dominant bodies, it's really the voice changes, right? It's like, I think there can be so much anxiety. I know I enjoy singing, not professionally, but just really love singing. And one of the things I'm like, oh, how is testosterone going to impact pitch? I feel like I don't know how to sing anymore. And you're a singer as well. So I wonder if people ever come to you with concerns around like, I want to keep singing, or also know trans feminine folks who are like, who are singers and have a really complex relationship with their voices because, they might feel some sort of way around having a more masculine in air quote voice, whatever it means, while, having a feminine like identity and expression. Does that make sense? Or?
It totally does. And like, despite the fact that I was a vocal teacher a singing teacher rather for many years, I haven't really tackled this too much in my business currently. Not for any reason. I have been making courses and I haven't gotten there yet.
You've been busy.
Exactly. But I have like done a bunch of private lessons where this has been the key issue. And I mean, okay, let's talk about one thing at a time. Like taking tea,
absolutely.
There's a whole like process of adapting to your new voice on tea. And it takes longer than most people would like, to put it mildly. People really want to be good now. And it does change your relationship to singing. So, but like, I don't know. I think there are risks with taking any medication, and your voice is going to change anyway. Like whether you take tea or not, your relationship to singing will change. Like if I listen to recordings of myself from 2010, which is when I released my first album, I sound nothing like I do now. I mean, it's been 15 years and my voice has deepened, which is just what happens. Or of course, you could become disabled, or you could acquire any number of things that could change your voice. Like by not making the decision, you're not changing your voice. Time is changing your voice. You're just making an active choice in that.
I love that you made that point, because I think that people often, when we think about gender, we think about it as this fixed entity almost. And I think it does change for anybody, cis or trans or gender expansive or non-binary, right? Our gender expression and presentation changes. Our voice definitely, it changes with aging. It just does, right?
Totally.
Kids' voices change. And as you get older, voice change. I know as a disabled person, it's like vocal cords are a muscle, right? And so like when I'm having flare-ups or I'm tired, like, that those vocal cords get really tired, or I can feel it, right? And I'm like, oh, why is my voice like this? And I'm like,
or even if you have back pain, like it impacts your ability to breathe, which impacts your voice. Your voice is a really good like barometer for your general health also, which is super interesting.
Exactly, which also creates some really interesting ideas about what we consider acceptable about voice or not. I've been thinking about this a lot as a disabled person who's aging with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which then also, because my spine is unstable, my voice could be different any day. And I speak for a living, as a therapist, as a speaker, and I'm always like, wow, what happens, and I'm like, oh, but what if part of disability justice is also kind of challenging these ideas about professional, in air quotes, voices, right? Like, what does it mean to be like a speaker who maybe that struggle a little bit more with breath some days than others, right? And I don't know if folks are really, I love that you're coming from this more intersectional perspective where you're looking at gender, but I think you also have some experience, in working with disabled folks and kind of in affirming ways, and also neurodivergent folks who also might have feelings about their voice for lots of different reasons. Exactly. I don't know. Just if you have thoughts, go for it.
Yeah. Well, so I have had chronic pain since I was 20 and I'm 36 now. So I'm certainly not at like the height of my chronic pain now. Like, thank you, universe. It's very well managed. But there were years where it was like really unmanageable. And I was also at that time like a professional singer. Like I was weddings and restaurants and, like jobbing gigs, we used to call them. Yeah. And like, I remember thinking to myself, like, I can't take a big breath in. Like, and I was trying to come up with like a new way to phonate that involved less intercostal muscle because it was so painful for me. I don't know if I succeeded, but like I was a jazz singer, so there's a lot more like forgiveness in terms of vocal technique. You can like do things a little differently than, it's a little bit more stringent in terms of classical. But I do think there's like a lot more room for different types of voices, especially as we move forward in time than there ever were, And then on top of that, I worked for the Disabled Women's Network of Canada. And that job really helped me to like broaden my understanding of what accessibility means and what, the cross disability sphere. And I have like a very radical definition of disability. I'm like, you wear glasses? Welcome to the club.
Absolutely. Yes. We're all just temporarily abled if that's who you are, but really like yes, most of the world is disabled or is going to be disabled at some point. Exactly.
I mean, I'm sure this is a little bit off topic, but like, I cannot understand when people aren't like fully ready to jump on the disability justice bandwagon. I'm like, it's in your future, my friend, or someone you love.
Right.
Like, this is for you.
I often joke that finally my age is catching up with my disability. So people are not so shocked that I can't do things like they were in my 20s,
so frustrating.
or when I was a child. Exactly. Anyway, we can go on all the tangents we want. I feel like that I'm notorious for going on tangents with actually my guests. So don't worry about it. But yeah, I have so many thoughts on this, but let's look back on like the hormones piece, right? The masculinizing not happening as fast as people would wish. And of course, for folks who are going from testosterone dominant to estrogen dominant bodies, right? Hormones don't do really anything to voice.
Not to the voice, yeah.
Which sometimes hard news to break to some of the younger clients I've worked with,
But you know what? It's so funny. Like having talked to many people on both sides of this, it's like the trans masculine people are like, who can't take T are like mad that they can't train. And then the trans women are mad that they can't take a drug to fix their voice. Like everybody wants what the other person has.
I know. I often joke. I was like, I wish that we could just all mix and match with each other.
I know.
That would be so great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A little take a titty, leave a titty program.
Absolutely. Exactly. Well, and all of those things are just so wild to me as well. Because like you said, there's also like, queer voices, right? And like gay men are like more effeminate, again, in air quotes, who where you can't really hide kind of who you are because your voice has a certain quality, right? And voice is a big piece of that as well. So it's this whole gender thing. It's always so fascinating to me. I'm like, it's so
thorny. It's very thorny.
It's thorny. And also it's just so, what's the word I'm looking for? Fragile. I remember even as a child thinking, okay, if just me wearing different pants and wearing short hair means that people think I'm a boy, how solid is this gender thing, really? You know what I mean?
So real, Alex. Oh my goodness. Totally.
Yeah. And so thinking about all of this, right, I'm just really curious about the role of like playfulness and creativity, right? You talk about vocal curiosity in your bio. I think one of the things I love about your work, it is that quality of playfulness and creativity. I think sometimes, especially for trans and non-binary folks or gender expansive folks, it can feel so heavy to do gender affirming things, right? Oh, I'm doing this thing. I have complicated feelings around it, right? And so anything that can bring like
levity,
joy or levity, that's a great word. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more how you bring that into your work, that playfulness, that curiosity for listeners who are maybe not as familiar with your work.
Sure. So when people ask like, where should I start with this work? I think they're always expecting me to be like, okay, do 10 resonance push-ups. but I always say to start with a warm-up, because one of the thing that brings the levity down in this practice is this need to perform gender adequately. Like, am I woman enough? Am I man enough? Am I whatever enough in this work? So I always say, look, if you've never done a voice practice before, just start with a warm up. And I'm going to take this opportunity to plug my free warm up that I have on my website. If people want it, go get it right now.
Do it. I was going to say, we can even try it out if you want to.
Oh, sure. We can talk about it. Yeah. So, I mean, all a warm up is like a stretch and a face stretch, maybe a little neck massage, and then like some generalized exercises to get your voice warm. And what that does, it does a bunch of things. One, it like sets you up for success. So you're way more likely to be able to achieve the exercises if your voice is a little stretched and warmed up. Just like you wouldn't just take off in a sprint, you do a little bit of walking, a little stretching, then you go for a jog and maybe you do some fast running, right? So it's just like, you don't want to work on cold muscles. Absolutely. Then it also helps you to develop proprioception. So body awareness. You might not know like what you're able to do or what's challenging or what's easy. You might not know, but through a warm up, you can develop that without any of the baggage of, is this woman enough or man enough? Right. And then the third thing it does really well is it like builds up your tolerance to silliness, because sometimes I forget because I've been in this game a long time, but it's so silly to like make a bunch of weird sounds. And I can just see the like blushing happening on people's faces when they do it. Like they get beet red. They're like, oh God, it's horrible. The sounds I'm making. I will out silly you any day of the week because I've just been doing it longer. I have absolutely no shame anymore. And that's what I want my students to develop, like just the ability to like squeak and squawk and have your voice break and just do what needs to happen in order to really get into like, what am I capable of? And what do I even want from my voice?
Yeah, because otherwise you're not even kind of familiar with that. And I love that. I think that levity and silliness and playfulness are so useful in every area of life. You know, I used to work with teenagers a lot as a therapist. And sometimes I'd be like, oh my God, Alex, you're so weird. I'm like, you haven't even touched the like edges of my weird, honestly. We can get so much weirder.
Teenagers have absolutely no tolerance for weirdness, right? Because it's like when you first start to develop the realization that people are aware of you as a person, and it's
totally
mortifying, right, to be known.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But as you get older, like my older students have very high silly tolerance, right?
Yeah,
but you can develop it young if you try.
Absolutely. And I really nurture it. I'm like, look, none of your peers are in this room. We can get silly. You know, I'm bound by confidentiality as your therapist. So we can make weird sounds. Exactly. We can like do all the somatic therapy exercises you want and nobody will know. Like, but it can be really hard to bring out that silliness. And I know there's also like on a more serious note, I know that for a lot of neurodivergent folks, especially autistic folks, there can be a lot of shame around sound and voice. Even, although I'm a family therapist, I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner. So I like to bring the body into that healing process and even like steaming through sound. I know I do a lot of steaming through sound. I've used that a lot as a parent, especially when my oldest was really young. Steaming through sound, steaming through vocalizing, toning, but like making like weird high-pitched T-Rex noises, as we call them in our family.
Love.
But if you're not in a neurodivergent affirming environment, family or educational context, there can be so much shame because people have been told off or have had really, why are you making that sound, or that sound is annoying, right? Or, so there can be like I don't know if you've ever come across that there's also an extra like push away from that levity, that playfulness, that because there is so much kind of trauma that maybe people have had around being told off for making certain noises. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And on top of that, there's some documentation that shows that autistic people like process sound differently. Obviously, we all know this, but their own voice as well, right? So I've definitely had a student that was like, I can't speak any lower than this because I cannot hear my voice. If I, and like the trope of like autistic people who speak a little at a higher volume, it's like there's a physiological reason for that.
I was so relieved actually when I found out about this because I was like, oh my God, more and more of my life makes sense.
Yeah.
Because often I'm like, I'm speaking too low or I'm speaking too loud because, I listen to my podcast sometimes. I'm like, my accent sounds like this. In my head, it doesn't sound anything like this. Or sometimes, when I'm learning, especially when I say a word in English and then somebody who's an English speaker is like, that's how you pronounce it. I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
that makes me, I hate.
That's true. Yes.
That's a whole other thing. I think English is the one language that you can say it any way you want. Okay. Other languages, yes, we should attempt to like imitate the accent. English, go for it.
It's the most bizarre language. I know we've been watching Chaos and it's like, is it Minotaur? Is it Minotaur? I was like, I don't know.
There's no rules for pronunciation. How's anyone supposed to learn this?
Exactly.
But just going back to what we were saying, if you've been told all your life over and over, like, hey, lower your voice, you're speaking kind of loud, like you're a nuisance, then you're obviously going to have hangups about engaging with your voice. So, I mean, you really have to go to therapy. That's like your department.
Absolutely.
I don't have much advice on that front besides work on healing that trauma, because if you can break through that barrier, it's a more enjoyable process.
Absolutely. And I think it's a both end. Sometimes people might be more willing to actually be playful with sound in kind of a learning how to use their voice context than in a therapeutic context, right? Yes. So sometimes it really goes hand in hand. I'm like, okay, there's some voice stuff. And I might even say, it'd be really great for you to work with a voice teacher or a speech and language therapist to really like have a space where all you're doing is voice exploration. And then here we can talk about all the feelings that come up while you're doing the work there, which I really love, kind of being able to do that work hand in hand.
This is why we need each other and why there's like a lot of like a beautiful opportunity for cross discipline growth.
Absolutely. But I love the vocal curiosity piece. Are there exercises that you might be willing to share that kind of you recommend at the beginning? So if somebody is listening or watching the episode on YouTube and is like, oh, I'm really intrigued by this thing that Renée has mentioned about warming up your voice. And like I said, I'm always willing to be silly. So I'm happy to be your guinea pig at the exercises if you'd like to share.
Okay, well, so warming up is pretty basic. So I don't know if we need to cover that today, but I will give you an exercise that isn't in all of my courses. And that is the sound journal. And this is the exercise that is probably people are the most resistant to it. And it's not strictly speaking like required. It's something that I picked up through improvising singing. So I like have a background in jazz, and improvised music is a part of that. And I went to the California Jazz Conservatory to take a workshop with Theo Bleckman about jazz for a week, like a long time ago. This is like in 2017. But this is where I learned the sound journal exercise. And basically, when you're like an improvising musician, one of the things a serious improviser will do is develop a language on the instrument of improvising sounds. And you can really tell, like if you've never listened to improvised music, you might not notice the difference between someone who has developed that alphabet of sound and someone who has not. So basically, it's a pretty simple exercise. You just start by writing down all the sounds that you can make. And you'll be like, that sounds really open-ended, but you'll be shocked at how fast you run out of ideas, and you have to dig a little bit. So I always say, like, let's start with the natural world. Okay. So could you imitate a cat sound?
I mean, maybe.
Great.
Something like that.
So I would maybe write that as like
cats are really hard.
Cat's a hard one. Sure.
It's like we started with the hard one for me.
Okay. We'll go to another animal. How about a dog sound?
I'm much better with dogs.
Let's hear that one. Okay.
See?
All right.
Much more comfortable with dogs for some reason.
So then you could write as many animals as you could think of that you know the sound of. I don't know the sound of a yak, for instance, but I know a snake, and I know a goat, and I know a sheep, and I could write all that down. Then you might go into the unnatural world. So could you imitate your microwave? If you have a microwave.
I do have a microwave, but I'm terrible with microwaves. It's like, how does a microwave sound? Now I have the blank moment.
So mine sounds like
yes, that's a good microwave. Excellent. Yes.
Thank you very much. So you can look around your space and imitate your fridge, and you could imitate the sound, like the sound that YouTube makes when you turn it on the TV, or the cars outside. Like we're imitating sounds.
Oh yeah, like machines. Fire tracks, like
or
ambulances.
Yeah, excellent. And then you don't have to imitate things. You could also just like choose really basic sounds. Like, could you do an ascending tone on
like a ooh, that kind of thing?
Let's make it even
just
simpler.
Go up. Okay.
Just go up on Beautiful. So the next step of that is to take all the things you've written down and diversify them. So try to find variations of each one. So let's just take that ascending on Could you do that as quietly as possible? I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, it was so quiet. That was
so quiet.
I can get pretty quiet. I know it's hard to believe, but
great. Okay, so now I want you to identify, how did that feel different from the normal volume for you?
Yeah, it felt like I almost wanted to be like smaller.
Okay,
like
made
my
you feel
body
physically
just
smaller.
wanted to like just be smaller and quieter.
Yeah. So for me, I felt when I do that, let me try it. I feel like, that's interesting. Normally I feel less pressure, but today I kind of feel like I had to control it more. So I felt more pressure actually. Wow, I didn't warm up today. So like, you can do all these variations, and then you start to make observations about how they feel. Now that wasn't part of the original exercise. That's my addition, because I want to help students develop this like proprioception. Like when I'm quieter, this happens. When I'm louder, this happens. Now let's do another variation. Can you do that same ascending sound, but on E instead of A? Try it.
E.
Yeah. E. Go ahead one more time.
E.
Good. Now do ah again, just to see if you can feel a difference.
Ah. I want to do like I did E because I imitate sounds as part of my neurodivergence. So I was like, oh, that is fascinating. I tried to do but I'm still doing it like the E. I was like, well, that's fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And could you do them back to back and see if they make a difference physically for you?
I don't know. Let's
find out.
Try. I was like, this is not pre-prepared. So it's like, we did not try this earlier. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I want to do almost the same thing. My body doesn't want to differentiate the sounds.
But you were able to, right? Like I can hear, so something is physically happening.
Yes.
Right? So I would, maybe have you say, go ahead and drive it and try all the different vowels. E, A, A, O.
Now I'm fascinated by this exercise. Yes.
Italian probably has some vowels that English doesn't have, and you can add those into the mix. And so that's just we just picked one sound and we had like 10 variations, and there's really no limit to like the web that you can create, but it's supposed to be like a fun, silly, engaging exercise.
Yeah.
And that's the sound journal.
That is really cool. That's a very cool exercise.
Thank you.
So, and you talked about your courses. So what courses do you have out there at the moment that people want to learn more from you? And, if they're like, this sounds great. What kind of classes can people take with you?
Sure. So there's one we've already mentioned, which is Mix and Match, Designing Your Non-Binary Voice. And that's the latest course that I just released. I think anyone could take this course because, as I said, it's designed for like anyone of any starting point to reach any goal. And it's a little bit more like student-led, I would say, and culturally responsive. Like there's less of my ideas of gender in that course than any other course. But my bestseller is Mindful Voice Feminization. So this is for the girlies, and specifically it addresses like the psychological hurdles that come up in the feminization process. Because it's, as you know, there's a lot of baggage there.
Yes.
So it comes with like a journal prompts workbook. There's a lot of like reflexive exercises to do. And then the third student course that I have is Masculinize Your Voice Without Testosterone. So this is about imitating the effects of testosterone without taking it. And a lot of people will take this if they're too young to take tea, or if they're planning to, but they're on a wait list, or if they just don't want to because they don't want such specific effects of tea, but they want that. And I do have some people who message me to ask if they can take it if they're on tea, and definitely it can help. And I'm hoping someday to make a course like specifically for adapting to your voice on testosterone, but there will be a lot of crossover with the Masculinize Without Tea course because there's a lot of similar exercises.
Yeah. And I think that's really great as well, because some people cannot go on hormones also for health reasons.
Absolutely.
I've had clients, both with testosterone dominant or estrogen dominant bodies that for various reasons cannot go on hormones for health reasons.
Yeah.
And so even just to have a resource where you're like, look, you can still work on your expression, including your voice, without kind of hormonal changes necessarily, if that's not something that's accessible to you for all the reasons you listed, or kind of for health reasons, right?
And it's good to like prepare if you're planning to take tea someday. Like a lot of people who take tea, people don't know this, but lots of people who take tea then go on to do voice training after.
Yeah.
It's very normal. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. There's just like no one path to your ultimate gender expression. And I would venture to say we never get there. There's no ultimate.
No, I really, honestly, over the years, my favorite metaphor of gender that I started using a few years back is like gender as a landscape. I think I started using it, I don't know, sometimes in 2010 something. When I did my Ignite talk, I was like, oh, actually gender is a landscape, which means we can even revisit the same places, but in a different way. Like I feel like as I get older and I get less worried about how people read me, I'm really revisiting femininity through this masculine queer lens and really embracing like, oh, actually, maybe I do want to wear earrings again. I actually do want to express, my gender in a different way. And I just love the idea that we can kind of come back, revisit places we've been, go through different lands, go to different places. I don't know that we're ever done. I don't know. I don't
think we're ever done.
No, how can we be done? Like it's with this, whatever gender is, really.
Especially as the goalpost keeps moving. I don't know if you're not on TikTok, so you don't know, but like the things they're expecting of women nowadays, woo, it's even worse than we had.
I'm not on TikTok, but I am really passionate. I love reality TV, and especially as a marriage and family therapist, I do love dating shows and relationship shows. And sometimes I'm so confounded. And luckily, one of my nesting partners is on TikTok. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Why are they talking like this or saying this or presenting in this way? And they're like, let me tell you what's happening. I'm like, I thought there was pressure in the 80s and 90s, but now the pressure is like,
I know,
off the chart.
I always used to say, like, being a teenager in the 2000s was brutal. Like,
yes,
but I don't know if I'd want to be one now. To be honest,
I was a teenager in the 80s. I thought that was bad enough, even though I love the 80s. And now I feel like there's so much input as well that teenagers have about what's right, what's wrong, how they should dress, how they should look, how they should sound.
Exactly.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
There's a name for everything now, which we didn't have.
There's a name, whether it's accurate or not sometimes, or whether people are using, I'm like, do we need to use all this very medicalized terms too?
Yeah,
and I was like, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
People will, like, just sort of tangentially, people will often ask me to characterize voices on TikTok. Like, I respond to people's comments, and some people always ask me, like, what's the gay voice?
Yes.
And it's like, you can call something the gay voice, but it's like impossible to pin down. It's this weird nebulous thing. And like, just like you're saying, there's lots of trends vocally and otherwise that have a name, but you can't ever really pin them down very well. And that just makes the goalpost impossible, and it makes people perpetually dissatisfied, you know?
Absolutely. Well, and also just the influence of like media, right? I remember, growing up, there was TV, of course, but it didn't have quite the pervasive impact that it has now. Even, growing up in Italy, think about how many more people in Sicily, young people would speak Sicilian, and older people would only speak Sicilian. But, now with decades and decades and decades of television, that has changed things. And now there's a lot more preservation of language, right? This kind of uniformity that happens. And even here, it's just like younger people pick up accents from areas they don't even live in because
fascinating
of what's represented.
That
right?
is fascinating.
I'm really fascinated, but just like the impact of media and social media as well on just
I noticed this in Mexico, actually,
right?
Because I spoke English with a lot of my friends. I speak Spanish as well, so it was a mix of both.
Yeah.
But a lot of people had like British accents in English. Because you don't, you get to choose your English accent when you're learning a second language.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yes.
How did you choose yours when you learn English?
It was the teacher, right? Because people were like, oh, why do you have this accent? And it's like, of course you mimic whatever accent the teacher or the tape you listen to, right? Or whatever TV shows you're watching, or it's fascinating.
Love it.
Yeah. So, and that cultural piece is so much harder to pinpoint, but, and I know that you're kind of going off a little bit in a different direction. I know that speech and language therapists or pathologists, as they're called in Canada and other places, are more on the medical side. But there's also a very real aspect of like caring for our voice, right? That like beyond all the other variations, I think that traditionally, a lot of folks kind of strain their voices maybe in ways that don't need to be strained or used. And so I don't know if that's something that's part of the work that you do, or that's something that it's really separate from the work that you do, or I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, certainly I always include like a section on vocal health with every course that I do. I think that people are like afraid of affecting their voice, of hurting their voice more than is like it's an outsized fear. It's not really reflected by the reality. Certainly it's possible, but to have like permanently damage your vocal folds, you need to be like, you have to have chronic laryngitis, or you have to be like ripping those chords every single night, like people in musical theater are like at risk of getting vocal nodes. None of my students use their voice enough to physically hurt their voice. The only exception, of course, is people on T who are constantly straining super hard because they have like an old pattern that they need to break, right?
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So of course I like tell people, warm up, hydrate appropriately, little sips throughout the day is best. Don't smoke if you can, or vape. That's just like straight bad for your whole body.
Yeah.
But harm reduction, if it keeps you from killing yourself, then great. Go ahead. And
Absolutely.
smoke. So I have a very harm reductive approach.
I'm a harm reduction therapist, so I'm right there with you. Yeah. If whatever gets you through the night.
Exactly. I'd rather you didn't for your vocal health, but
exactly.
You can if you need to. And then just if it starts to hurt or if it's consistently hurting, you do need to see a professional at some point, because also like I said earlier, I'm not a medical professional, and every so often there is somebody with a pathology who does need to have it looked at.
Of course.
And that's why I keep relationships with these people, and with speech language pathologists, with laryngologists. And I always just say, if your voice is consistently hurting, like acute pain, a little bit of soreness maybe is okay, like with any muscle, but acute pain, that's when you need to see your primary care physician.
Absolutely. Sure. But I love what you said as well, that actually it's really hard to hurt your voice unless you're like
harder
a musical theater or something.
Yeah.
Oh, harder than people think, right?
Yeah.
Because even that is kind of reassuring, I think, to folks, to kind of really hear that piece that actually we can be playful. We can be curious. We can explore
exercise.
Our voice. Yeah.
You can definitely sprain your ankle running, but watch out.
Be careful.
Be cautious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's that piece of being in tune with your body as well, right? And
totally.
And so do you find that sometimes this is also helping people be more present with themselves and more in tune with their bodies in other ways?
Yes, good point, actually. So I do an office hour every month, a live office hour. So people who are in any course can come and ask their questions. And occasionally I will see someone who demonstrates an exercise to me and they're not sure why it feels bad. And I'm like, oh, you are not noticing that you're breathing in this particular way or that your posture is in this particular way. And that's why I have the office hour, because every so often there's going to be someone who's not noticing something that I as a teacher will immediately notice. And that's normal. That's if it wasn't normal, I wouldn't need to do the office hour, So I always encourage people, bring your questions to the class, or if you're just curious, if you want to get feedback on an exercise, come to my office hour. I'm hoping in the future to increase the number of office hours I'm giving and create a more robust community for my students, but it's on the horizon. It's a 2025 project,
There's only so many hours in a day, and you already do the most. I'm always so impressed with I'm a subscriber on your channel on Instagram or whatever they're called now, the Instagram channels. And I was like, wow, Renee's posting something new again. It's you're just creating that content, and it takes time to create content for social media. So
I'm very lucky. I have an editor. So I work with my editor, Tegan. I just want to shout her out. She is, I wouldn't be able to do this without her.
Well, thank you, Tegan. But also you do produce a lot of really good content. And actually that leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you earlier, but we kind of went on other really interesting quest, is how did you come to this work, right? You were a trained singer and songwriter. Why choose kind of this path for yourself, if that's okay to ask?
So this path kind of chose me in a lot of ways, because when I was in my songwriting degree, I did a business course, an art business and arts course, and we had to make a plan for the next 5 years. And it was in that moment that I decided I wanted to settle on teaching singing, because I was still my focus, teaching singing to trans and disabled people primarily, because there are a lot of great singing teachers in the world, but very few with the empathy and expertise that I have to teach these populations. But they don't have a lot of disposable income for singing lessons traditionally. Yeah. So I created a scholarship program that I launched while I was in my songwriting degree. It's called the Right to Sing Award. And I think I raised maybe $1,000, and it just basically paid my salary so that I could give free lessons away. So beautiful. I advertise. Yeah, it was amazing. I advertised for donations through the community, and I advertised for applicants as well. And fun fact, everybody who received a scholarship was both trans and disabled, which
there's a lot of overlap in our community. No.
But so through the advertising, I think I took out a couple Instagram ads. an organization here in Montreal called Project 10, which services trans youth, so under 25. They reached out to me and said, hey, we see that you teach trans people voice stuff. Would you come and do a workshop called Transvocal Exploration? Because they had a speech language pathologist come in. And like, again, no shade to my brothers and sisters and siblings in the SLP world. It's just sometimes it's different. And they just weren't happy with this particular SLP because I think he had like some more prescriptive ideas about what the process would look like. And they wanted somebody non-binary, someone with a more expansive idea of what it could look like. And I was like, I've never done this before, but it sounds like everything I love, nerding out about the voice and solving interesting pedagogical problems and trans people, like sign me up.
Yeah, right.
So I did that workshop for them. And then I did it again in French. And I think I did it like a couple more times. And then whenever they had somebody who was looking for private lessons, they would send them to me because I was like the one person they had on file.
Yeah.
And then I did a bunch of the same workshop for another organization and another organization. You know, it just kind of grew from there until I turned around and everything I was doing was gender-affirming voice, and I wasn't doing singing anymore. And so that was when I made the decision, like, okay, this is what I do now. I better start a TikTok because that's where all the young trans people are at.
That is where they're all at, apparently.
So this was in 2021. I launched my TikTok and I like put out my first TikTok. I didn't really think anything of it. I literally recorded it like off the cuff, like blah, 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 you know, and it went viral because it was during TikTok's like warming period. There was like a moment in time when they were growing the platform that they would warm new creators. So push your content out really far. And it was very easy to grow and go viral on the platform if you were new at that time. So I think I got like 10,000 followers in one weekend, like something I had never seen before in my life.
Was that overwhelming as well? Because I'm like, I hardly have like not even 2,000 followers on Instagram already. Sometimes feels like a lot.
They're worth different. TikTok followers and Instagram followers have different.
I know it's different, but it's still a lot.
It was shocking. It was so shocking. I was overwhelmed. I like called my friend who had already gone viral on TikTok and I was like, please help me. I don't know what's happening. That was the moment I decided to pivot into online courses. And I even told my friend, like, I can't do a course. My value as a teacher is in what I bring to the individual. And she was like, okay, like you don't have to. But then my wait list filled up and I couldn't. And I thought like trans people are on wait lists for everything. And I don't want to be that. And where's the end, right? Like if I have this wait list, do I raise my prices? No. So I thought if I made a course, then I could put all the like 101 information in there. It could be at a price that was like very reasonable for how much information you were getting. Yes. And then my idea was people would take that and if they still had problems or still had questions, they could come to me after for private lessons. Well, it didn't really work out exactly that way, but it was so popular that it like was like, oh, this is what I do now, I guess. And so I actually just retired that first course like 3 days ago.
I saw that. Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh, I was sad about it. You know, it was like the start of my new life and now it's over. That part. You know?
Yeah. But you have all these other new courses that are really exciting. And I'm assuming that you retired that course because you feel like you really wanted to update your content.
Yes. So mix and match in my heart kind of replaced transvocal exploration because TVE was like a mixed course. So anybody could take it. But it was essentially the workshop I gave for Project 10, like in a course. Yeah. And there were no slides. Like I'd never heard of Canva when I made that course. And I'm just a stronger communicator in that medium now than I was when I made the course. And it was just causing like problems. People didn't know which course to take. So it made sense to retire it, but it was like, thank you for your service, transvocal exploration.
And it makes sense to me because it's like the more we do something, the more comfortable we get with it and the more we learn absolutely. I'm a better speaker now than I was 20 years ago, for sure, you know, and thankful to all the people who gave evaluations. How do you, because, right, that's how at least I was like, I always say to my people, I do read those evaluations. Please give me feedback. I actually do listen and change accordingly. How do you feel that this chose you, right? Because for a lot of us trans, non-binary, gender expansive folks, in a way, I know people are the same. How did you choose like your career? I was like, I don't know that I really chose it. Like just by virtue of who I am, like I had a lot of queer people and then trans people even before I transitioned and then neurodivergent people people. I was like, I don't know, maybe we just all attract each other. But even professionally, like, how do you feel about the fact that in a way, because of your identity and who you are, this work chose you?
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I have complicated feelings because on the one hand, I love my job. I think I have the best job in the world. I forget cisgender people exist, frankly. I don't ever have to talk to them.
I understand that feeling, yes.
Yeah, I love running a business. I love that I get to quickly respond to the needs of the community, that there's no one like, there's no, it runs at my pace, you know?
Yes.
So that's really wonderful. I was listening to Gender Reveal and they were talking about how beautiful it is to like be trans and not have to monetize it. And so part of me is like, what would that be like? I really wonder. I don't love like being in the public eye all the time. Not that I'm like so popular or famous or anything, but you know, I still get some hate comments, which is not so fun. I just wish trolls would like get hobbies. Like, let's bring hobbies back 2025, you know?
Yes. Hobbies outside of like harassing people on social media, especially harassing trans people on social media for existing.
I really feel bad for trolls because you must live such an impoverished life if you don't have other things to do with your precious life on this earth, you know, like learn to macrame. Come on.
That is so like, that is surreal. Whenever somebody leaves a hateful comment, I'm like, I can just like delete and block and just wish you well on your journey, because
like I don't think about them, but they're obviously thinking about me. It's so strange.
Yeah, I know this obsession with trans folks and arresting trans folks online, really, really not great. But yes, but it's tricky, right? Because when you exist as a trans person, especially in any pedagogical, educational context, it just happens in my experience that you kind of get pushed a little bit. And it's been really interesting now that there is more interest in disability. I mean, I've been writing about disability and sexuality for 20 years.
Wow.
But now that disability piece, especially with the sexuality piece, gets asked more and more, because finally people are like waking up a little bit more, tad more to disability justice issues. And the sad part is that there is still very few folks that talk about that intersection of disability and sexuality. But yeah, I don't know that it can be avoided. kind of. Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, and I had already been in the public eye for years. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why, like, the combination of not only being a teacher, but being a content creator came quite naturally to me, because I had released 4 albums before I did this. So I'd been marketing.
You had a whole career and you are a performer. Exactly.
I'd been marketing. I'd been writing newsletters. I'd been blogging before. I used to like run a blog with ads on it, you know, like that was related to music before. So like everything in my life kind of prepared me for this career. And when I look back at all the different things I've done and all the degrees that like everything kind of was leading me towards this. So I really feel like I'm in my vocation now, you know, like I've found my life's work, and it's beautiful.
That is beautiful. I love that. Well, you know, one question, I want to be respectful of your time, even though I feel like I could talk with you for like another 2 hours, but I won't, don't worry, much as I would like to. But one of the things I've been asking other trans, non-binary, gender expansive folks and guests on the show is like, how do you find joy at the moment? Because, you know, we are seeing kind of another wave of really intense anti-transphobic sentiments everywhere, I think. So how do you find like joy or comfort or pleasure in your life nowadays? Even just one small thing that you feel comfortable sharing with listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I find joy in my goals and hobbies. And this is why I always say, bring back hobbies for the trolls, because I would be nothing without the things that make my life well-rounded. So I'm a runner. I run like 3 times a week, and that's very challenging for me as a person with chronic pain. Yeah. But I do it real slow and carefully. And I did, in fact, learn to macrame in the pandemic, and I go to my little movie once a week. Like, that's the other great thing about running this business, is that I get to set my own hours. So what brings me joy is having like a beautiful work-life balance and creating a job that like it lives with my values, you know? So I stop working at like 3:30, 4 o'clock usually, with exceptions for wonderful interviews, of course. I don't work on Fridays usually. So it's a 4-day work week, which I want for everybody. And that allows me to do things like play the piano in the evenings and cook beautiful food for myself and see my friends and help my friends and go to Spanish class. And I have like a rich life outside of my work. So that's what keeps me sort of grounded at the moment.
I love that. I feel inspired. I always joke that I have a terrible boss and that terrible boss is me.
Don't do that.
I know, but I was
Be
an
the
academic.
change.
It's so hard to like unlearn. Like in academia, you just live and breathe academia. And so it's so hard to learn.
Just ask yourself the next time you want to work late, what would Renee do in this moment?
I am totally going to ask myself that. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be totally inspired by Renee's approach to like being an entrepreneur.
You know what I've been doing lately, actually? At 3:30, I turn my computer all the way off, which I didn't used to do. I used to let it run and I would feel guilty because I hadn't turned my computer off in 2 weeks. Now it is off every night from the time I finish work until the next day.
I tell you that and the sound journal, like I'm taking this 2 little nuggets with me. Thanks, Renee.
You're so welcome, Alex.
Oh, well, and then the question to ask all my guests at the end, is there anything we haven't talked about that you were hoping we would talk about in this interview today?
I think we covered it all, actually.
That's amazing. Well, I don't know about you listeners, but I'm taking so many wonderful nuggets. Like it's okay to be playful with my voice. I'm looking forward to experiment with the sound journal. Also, one of my intentions for 2025 is to take one of your classes because I'm like,
oh my gosh,
I've been wanting to, and I almost got the class that you were retiring. And I was like, I will have zero time to do this because I'm a terrible boss. But 2025, it will happen.
I believe in you.
So, dear listeners, or if you're watching on YouTube, viewers, I hope that you take away some nuggets of wisdom from all the beautiful insights that Renee has given us today. And thank you, Renee, for spending time with Gender Stories today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a genuine pleasure.
Oh my God, this has been so fun. All right, dear listeners and viewers, take care of your voice and play with it and see if you can find joy in your beautiful vocal expression. And until next time.